First of all, let me introduce our project in a few sentences. The 8 Points project was carried out over a course of 33 months with a €2.5 million funding from the EU. Its main objective was to improve the quality of life of people with autism by training professionals. Overall, more than 500 professionals were trained at 18 accredited training events. 3 conferences were held for an audience of 400. 2,000 pages of scientific literature were translated to Hungarian. 37 care institutions were supported by professionals. The competency of 140 parents was developed, and 100 families were involved at a leisure activity on the children's railway. We had established a set of criteria for autism-specific services for the key areas. We established an autism information website and a coordination center. The conference that ends our project in October has 2 guest lecturers, Mitzi Waltz and Ari Neiman, who will talk about the medical and social history and self-advocacy in autism. From November, a smaller program office will supervise and maintain the achievements of the project. The general public approaches autism in a normative way. Autism is considered a deviance, an abnormality. It considers people with autism as objects to be improved, corrected, and rehabilitated. It was a long journey that eventually led the parents' autistic self-advocacy. Mitzi Waltz wrote in her book that soon be available in Hungarian as well. At the first time, the medical model was dominant, which focused on the impairment of the individual based on a medical, diagnostic, therapeutical approach, and described the individual by focusing on the facts and deficits. Later, the social model analyzed the social interaction of the individual. It stated that disability becomes an impairment if the individual doesn't get appropriate support on his or her social interactions, and the society fails to make the necessary adjustments. The framework of the social model is defined by the combination of individual and the social situation of that individual. The multitude of different types of support meet the need of the individual has played a key role for the people with autism, not their physician or therapist. We are making advances in the direction of self-advocacy. Thanks to the 40-year-old parents' advocacy groups, the narrative of parents emerged and no longer be ignored by professionals. A similar milestone was the beginning of the self-advocacy in autism because their own narratives. The emergence of their own narratives formed the new unique autistic culture that clearly posed the threat. As early as the late 80s, the internet became available to the general public in the US, and those affected started communicating with each other. This has had an explosive impact of the self-advocacy activities of autistic people. Communicating by computers is effective among autistic people because messages are written, not spoken, and one spends as much time for decoding and expressing these messages as necessary. The largest and most well-known online sites soon connected thousands of members. The first autobiography was published in 1992 by the Australian Donna Williams under the title Nobody Nowhere. In the very same year, Donna Williams, Jim Sinclair, and Cassie Grant founded the first organization in the world run by and for autistic people, the Autistic Network International. Sinclair's article appeared in their printed paper, Our Voice, under the title Don't Mourn for Us. He voiced the new opinion, which clearly opposed the notion of curing autistic people, and for many autistic adults, this was the starting point of self-advocacy and remains the point of reference even today. Sinclair felt that parent groups prefer to have in a group a single passive member with autism, using that person as a curiosity or as a source of interesting information. However, the appearance of autistic groups that represents their own goals was clearly considered a threat. At the beginning of the 90s, when autistic people started checking into parent mailing lists and became frequent visitors at parent conferences, they were not enormously welcomed. The opinion of people affected as opposed that of parents and professionals trust less normative approaches. Lawrence Arnold became the first adult curator with autism of National Autistic Society in 2003 in the UK. Like many other adults with high-functioning autism, he only got his diagnosis when he was middle-aged. He had cared for his physically disabled mother for many years, who had been an active member of a local movement for the rights of people with disabilities in Coventry. The social model was at hand when he had to tackle his diagnosis on his own when his mother passed away. Therefore, he didn't consider his disability an inherent flaw, but the limitation of external systems. Arnold stated that this gave him an advantage over other autistic self-advocates who failed to cooperate with other disabled people. Tokenism must be avoided. Symbolic acceptance is not efficient like thinking of inclusion by having a quota of a single autistic person in a group and has no impact for the outcome. The theory of neurodiversity states that society must accept plurality, including autistic people, irrespective of the fact where they are on the spectrum. Neurodiversity is an approach that states that people with learning difficulties and disabilities have a brain functioning that differs from that neurotypical people, and this must be considered a natural variation of the human genome. And it must be considered the similar social category as gender, nationality, sexual orientation, or other disabilities. The support system must be established that doesn't normalize but offers support to the inclusion of neurodivergent people. Jim Sinclair mentioned in his speech in 1993 that many parents considered it the most traumatic moment of their lives when their children are diagnosed with autism. He asked parents to take on the perspective of the autistic person instead of grading. Non-autistic people consider autism as a tragedy. And as their children grow older, then disappointment and grief grows larger and larger. But this grief doesn't stem from the child autism in itself. It is grief over the loss of the normal NT-child the parents had hoped and expected to have. Autism is a way of being. It is not possible to separate the autism from the person. And if it were possible, the person you had left would not be the same person you started with. That is why the person must be accepted as an autistic person. Autism shouldn't be separated from the person or his or her personality. Data collection among autistic people also underline the same notion. We are not sick, we don't need to be cured, stated Sainsbury in 2011. Neurodiversity doesn't oppose therapy and education as long as it aims to improve the quality of life and not trying to get rid of non-normative differences. In summary, it can be stated that the social approach criticizing the normative approach is getting stronger in autistic self-advocacy movements, and this is also coupled with human rights. There is a small but loud national organization in the United States called the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, funded by Ari Neiman in 2006, who, other than being the president of the organization, is currently a member of the National Council of Disability in the United States. The position statement of this organization claims that the disability rights perspective within the autistic communities represented in the neurodiversity movement. Our goal is full participation and full representation. If anyone expresses guidelines on or about autism, wants to research autism, wants to organize services or programs, autistic people must be present, not just as a quota, but in the formal real representation and must have real influence served in the outcomes. Several young adults, autistic groups have appeared in Hungary as well, who made useful social media to find their peers, driven by the need to share personal experiences, occasionally with the need to take a common stance. An early example of that happened of the Walk for Autistic People, where two young ladies with Asperger's syndrome took on stage for the first time in their life in front of the audience of several hundred people, accepting their identity to commemorate their recently deceased friend. A group of enthusiastic autistic youngsters found me on Facebook as a project leader and asked to support that self-advocacy initiatives. With my colleagues, we decided to include professionals and take on these tasks. So far, it has been an informal activity, and dozen autistic youngsters meet every week in 2-hour meetings, and there are so-called NT participants who assist them in the process of self-advocacy. Research proves that self-advocacy of people with disability significantly depends on the level and the mode of support that they get. Only support based on the abilities of people with disabilities can be successful and that respects their will. Support as a framework, as accessibility, but does not impose limitation on people affected. 4 professional members have expressed the possible goals and asked the group members their opinion about it. We have laid down the rules. Neurotypical participants do not share their opinion on the topic and cannot influence the range of topics discussed, cannot vote, and do not have the right to make decisions. The method and speed of the recruitment, regulating membership, the values and goals of the group, action plans, decisions on the formal organization, that is pretty much everything is within the competence of autistic members. The NT participants help structure this meeting, keep the timing, and share their opinions whenever they are asked by the autistic members to do so. The project offers the physical environment for that meeting and also sends out the memo of each meeting strictly to the autistic members who are on the mailing list. Needless to say, all members are free to complement and add comments to these memos. In between the weekly meetings, members are engaged in lively online discussion. Run about the 8th to 10th meeting, the group underwent a serious crisis. It was caused by individualized interest that contrasted with group interest. On the other hand, the meetings were far too theoretical, and the real actions was missing. As a result of the crisis, the group spontaneously transformed, several members quit, and other members joined. Currently, we see a very active group that respects individual differences, skills, interests, and difficulties. The group has specific actions on its agenda, which were accepted by its members. They organized a Skype meeting with Ari Neyman last week. And for example, the topics to be discussed by the self-advocacy section at the final conference of this project will be defined by this group. Thank you very much.
Thank you. What about the surprise?
And I have a small surprise for everybody in this room. We have 3 colored cards: the red, the yellow, and the green. And we have a rule how to use it. This is a color communication badges. You can use it not in this, but the traditional name badge, or yeah, is it? Yeah. If you use the green, it means I have trouble initiating conversations, but I want to be approached by people who are interested in talking. The yellow, I only want to talk to people I recognize. not to strangers or people I only know from internet. If I approach you, you are welcome to talk back to me. But unless you have already met me face to face, you should not approach me to talk. And the red badge, I don't want to talk anyone. Or I only want to talk people I choose to approach. If I approach you, you are welcome to talk back. So please use it, but not in this conference.
Thank you
And you
so
can
much.
take one.